As we celebrate Father's Day, a new report by the Institute for Family Studies shows how important two-parent homes are in protecting children from poverty. The data shows the odds of black children being poor in non-intact families are 3.6 times greater than for black children with married parents. And there's much more along those lines. Here to tell us about it is the man who wrote that report, Brad Wilcox from the Institute for Family Studies, and Rob Smith is back with us too. Brad, just lay out for us this new data that you've been looking at here. We've talked about this issue before, but I'd love you just to sort of to lay out the facts of this issue.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. What we see in this new research is that black kids in single-parent families are about twice as likely to land in prison compared to their peers in intact two-parent families, and they're also less likely to graduate from college. And what's striking, too, about this research is that it shows that black kids in intact two-parent families are actually doing better than white kids in single-parent families. So kind of is showing us that for both black and for white children, there's a real advantage to having those two parents in your corner.
It's interesting, Rob, this whole argument, we've talked about this before, this whole argument about family stability. Conservatives have, and I've been engaging with this for many, many years as a policymaker back in the UK government now here. I've written many times about it in my books. But conservatives have often shied away from making these arguments, Rob, because they don't want to be seen as kind of finger wagging and lecturing and sort of being mean about single parents and so on. None of that is what we're talking about here. We're just saying, just look at the facts. We're constantly told to look at the data. There's no question that if we set as a goal that every child should be raised in a stable, loving home, that is good for a whole range of social policy issues. And that is not moralizing. It's just looking at the data and coming to a policy position based off it.
Well, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think the problem is that conservatives and liberals kind of miss the boat, both when we don't speak of these issues, right? Because you have conservatives that are afraid to talk about this because they don't want to be seen as, like you said, moralizing, finger wagging, whatever. And they also don't want to be seen as racist, particularly when we have this conversation when it comes to black kids and, black families and single parent households. And I think with the left, they really do miss a moment because the left is always trying to talk about the ills of the African American community in terms of racism, in terms of a legacy of slavery, in terms of all of this other stuff, when really there are things that can be fixed in the family structure, and this study pretty much bears it out. There are things that can be fixed in the family structure that will fix a lot of those things that the left tries to pretend is a function of white racism, is a function of all of these other things. So yeah, we miss the boat when we're not able to talk about this conversation, and it's sad that it's only a conversation that we're allowed to have here, and it's not a national conversation because it really does need to be. I bet that more black kids are hurt by coming up in single-parent households without a father than they are by this specter of white racism, of white supremacy, of all of this other stuff that the left tries to push.
Yeah, really well put. Brad, what are some of the solutions we may have? I mean, you can't sort of engineer human relationships, but talk about some of the things we can do to kind of create an environment, a climate, where we encourage family stability rather than discourage it.
Yeah, great question, Steve. So I think one thing we could start with is just eliminating the marriage penalties that affect so many lower income and working class families now. I was talking to a family here in Virginia recently, a family with two beautiful little daughters, and they were not married. I was going to talk to them about that, and they said, well, they hadn't gotten married because they actually sat down at the kitchen table and calculated the numbers and realized that if they got married, they'd lose access to Medicaid here in Virginia. So one thing we should definitely do moving forward is to kind of basically reform our public policies in ways that would kind of address that. A second thing that we could do, I think, also is to kind of do a lot more to talk about what's called the success sequence in public schools and in PSAs across the U.S. And the success sequence is basically talking about the importance of education, work, and marriage in that order for young adults before they have kids. And if they follow those three steps, before they have kids, their odds of being poor are dramatically lower, just 3%, and their odds of realizing the American dream are quite high. About 86% will get the middle class or higher if they follow those three steps before having kids. So that kind of message needs to be more prominent in our public schools and other public venues.
And just quickly on that point, Rob, this is a point you made before when we talked about this, which is, yeah, you can have all the policies you want, but in the end it's cultural. You've got to affect the culture if you want to change this.
Yeah, you do. And like I said, I think I've said this before on this very show, you cannot legislate morality and you can't legislate culture. So what we need to start doing is we need to start having a conversation about what in the culture is sort of promoting this idea that fathers don't need to be in the household, or that fathers are somehow less worthy than mothers. This sort of, glamorization of single parent household, particularly single mother households in the African American community. If we don't have that conversation and really have it without fear of hurting feelings or anything like that, then we're not going to get to the root causes of that issue. I believe that as a country, we do not have the conversation. Conservatives have a different conversation. Liberals have a different conversation. But I don't know that either side is really affecting the culture and really digging down into the cultural problems that are there.
I so agree with you. Well, we're going to keep talking about it. Thank you, Brad. Great to see you. And Rob, we'll see you in a bit.